Welcome to our training on navigating the IEP Part 1. This training is part 1 of a 4-part training on navigating the IEP. Part 1 covers the requirements of notification to parents for an IEP meeting, IEP team members, IEP exceptionalities, general student information, and special factors to be considered for a child with a disability. My name is Jessica Rodrigue, and I'm going to be your presenter for today's training, Navigating the IEP Part 1. Families Helping Families of Greater New Orleans is one of 10 nonprofit family resource centers in the Families Helping Families network of centers. We're here to provide support to children and youth and adults with disabilities or special health care needs. We do this through individual assistance, information sharing, outreach, and trainings. Families Helping Families of Greater New Orleans provides over 100 webinars and in-person trainings a year on special education and disability-related topics. We invite you to check out our calendar of events at www.fhfofgno.org on a regular basis and register for any upcoming trainings that might be of interest to you. We also invite you to request specific trainings that are currently not being offered. Chances are, if you're interested in a topic, someone else might be as well. I'd like to begin today by going over what our learning goals are. Today, I hope your learning goals will increase your knowledge on frequently used acronyms and bulletins related to the IEP process. Hope to increase your knowledge on understanding the requirements of notifying parents for an IEP meeting. We're going to be discussing the 3 types of IEPs and their purpose. I hope to increase your knowledge on the IEP form and the different sections, IEP exceptionalities, who are those required team members and how team members can be excused, and then the many sections of the general student information with a focus on the special factors section. I'd first like to start with acronyms and bulletins. Throughout this presentation, I will be using a few acronyms. I will always give you the full meaning and state it is also known by, and then give you that acronym. I might go back and forth occasionally, but I'd like to provide you with the following list of acronyms before we get started. Some frequently used acronyms in this training are IDEA, that it stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IEP is the Individualized Education Program. FAPE, F-A-P-E, stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. And then SER is the Special Education Reporting System. Also, we have some bulletins. So information on the content of this training can be found in the following Louisiana bulletins. You have Louisiana Bulletin 1508. This is the Pupil Appraisal Handbook. This is the regulatory guide for pupil appraisal when conducting individual evaluations for students suspected of being exceptional and in need of special education and related services. Then you have Bulletin 1530. This is the Louisiana IEP Handbook for students with exceptionalities. This document outlines the legal procedures of the IEP process as mandated by that federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then you have Bulletin 1706. Subpart 1 of this document are the regulations for implementation of the Children with Exceptionalities Act for students with disabilities. Before we jump right into the IEP forms, I'd like to do a little bit of a background. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, is the federal law that mandates special education. Special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. This includes instruction conducted in the classroom, in the home, in hospitals and institutions, and in other settings, and also instruction in physical education. Specially designed instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. It must meet the unique needs of the child and ensure the child has access to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards expected for all students. Instruction in physical education means the development of physical and motor fitness. fundamental motor skills and patterns, and skills in individual and group games and sports. This could include adaptive PE, movement education, and motor development. Special education also includes speech language pathology services or any other related service, things like physical therapy, occupational therapy. Special education also can include travel training, which provides instruction as appropriate to children with significant cognitive disabilities and any other children with disabilities who require instruction to enable them to develop an awareness of the environment in which they live and learn those skills necessary to move effectively and safely from place to place within the environment. Special education can also include vocational education, which means organized educational programs that are directly related to the preparation of individuals for paid or unpaid employment, or for additional preparation for a career not requiring an advanced degree. An individualized education program team, an IEP team, determines which of these services are needed for each qualifying child. Decisions should be based on the student's individual education evaluation and IEP team members at that IEP team meeting. The IEP is a unique plan for one child that will guide everyone involved in the education of that child. The plan is created annually and must be updated at least once per year. The IEP has two purposes. One is to establish measurable annual goals for the child, and two is to state the special education and supplementary aids and services the school district will provide to or on behalf of the child. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA's provisions around scheduling an IEP meeting involve both common sense and courtesy, and they're intended to ensure that parents have every opportunity to attend that meeting and to contribute. This includes notifying parents of the meeting early enough to ensure that they will have an opportunity to attend and schedule a meeting at a mutually agreed upon time and place. IEPs should never be cookie cutter. It's important to remember that that I in the IEP means individualized. So that brings us to notifying parents of the meeting. The school district notification to parents must tell parents a few things. First, that meeting notice should describe the purpose of the meeting, the time, and the location of the meeting. The purpose of the meeting, it can vary. It may be an annual meeting to discuss goals for next year, but it may also be a meeting to discuss lack of progress or to discuss age of majority, behavior concerns, or other issues. This notice should tell parents who will be at the meeting. This includes the actual names of the people attending, not just their role. The notice should tell parents that parents and school districts have the right to invite other people with knowledge or special expertise about the child. This includes any related service personnel that the student might have. If the parent invites someone that has knowledge or special expertise about the child, the parent alone determines whether that individual meets the criteria. IDEA does not require the parent to notify the school district who they're inviting to join the IEP team, but it may be a matter of courtesy and good teamwork to do so. This notice must also let the parents know that they may request that the Part C service coordinator or other representative of the Part C system be invited to attend that initial IEP meeting for a child who previously served under Part C of IDEA. Part C services in Louisiana is, the program is called Early Steps. It's Louisiana's early intervention system. It is always best for the parent to attend the IEP meeting in person. IDEA requires school districts to use other methods to ensure parent participation. This includes individual or conference calls, video conferences, or other technology. If the school district cannot convince a parent to attend an IEP meeting, they need very detailed documentation of their attempts to arrange a mutually agreed upon time and place before holding that meeting without the parent. As a note, if this is an initial IEP, which we're going to talk in just a moment about the 3 types of IEPs, the child cannot receive services without the written consent of the parent. So before we get started on the different sections of the IEP, I'd like to go over the 3 types of IEPs. So we have the initial IEP. This is developed for a student with an exceptionality who has met criteria for 1 or more exceptionalities and who has never received special education services except through maybe an interim IEP from an approved Louisiana school or program. So if this is your child's first IEP in the state of Louisiana, that would be their initial IEP. You then have the review IEP. This is reviewed and revised at least annually. It can be done more frequently if you need to look at the appropriateness of the program, placement, or progress in the general education curriculum, or look at any related services needed by the student. And then you have an interim IEP. An interim IEP shall be developed for students who have severe or low incident impairments documented by a qualified professional concurrent with the conduct of an initial evaluation. And this is according to Bulletin 1508, which is that pupil appraisal handbook. An interim IEP may be developed for students who have been receiving special education services in another state while they're conducting an initial evaluation in the state of Louisiana. An interim IEP may also be developed concurrent with the conduct of an initial evaluation for a student who is out of school. This includes students ages 3 through 5 who are suspected of having a disability, and for former special education students through the age of 22 who may have left a public school without completing their public education by obtaining a state diploma. Regardless of if it's an initial IEP, review IEP, or interim IEP, the form does not change. Additionally, while some schools still use paper IEP forms, most have transitioned to electronic copies. Louisiana Department of Education uses a special education reporting system, also referred to as SER, to store data on all students receiving special education services. There is no right or wrong way. Even if the IEP is being created on a computer, you still should receive a copy of that completed IEP. Before we do a deeper dive into the individual sections of the IEP, I first want to go over the actual IEP forms. So I will be taking the entire IEP forms and going through each section pretty quickly, and then we'll dive deeper into each section of the IEP. So this section on the screen here is referred to as the general student information. It includes the basic school information, the student's exceptionality, the IEP participants, information about the student's communication needs, the student's strengths, parent concerns, and then at the very bottom, the evaluation and reevaluation results. This page is a continuation of the general student information. It includes information about the student's academic, developmental, and functional needs, information about the statewide assessment results, and progress or lack of progress expected in general education curriculum. Additionally, it includes considerations of special factors. These include behavior, English learners, communication, instruction and use of Braille, assistive technology services and devices, and individual health needs. Finally, it includes information about the student's transition course of study, if that's applicable, and the educational needs of the student. The next section of the IEP is the instructional plan. The instructional plan includes the educational needs area and content area, present level of performance and academic or functional goals. It also includes how the goal will be measured and the date the goal was achieved. This page also provides room for measurable short-term objectives and then the personnel who's responsible for implementing the goal. There will be a separate page like this for every educational need area and content area for the child. The next section of the IEP is accommodations. There are 7 pages in total of potential accommodations for students. These include presentation accommodations, response accommodations, timing and scheduling accommodations, and setting accommodations. This is just one of those 7 pages. The next section of the IEP is program services. This section includes the assessment the child will take, if they receive special transportation, the regular general education classes they will attend, and any extracurricular activities they will attend, and then information on extended school year service criteria. It also includes spaces for explanations for why a child isn't attending any regular education classes or activities with non-disabled peers. Finally, there is a place for supports needed for school personnel. The next page is for the services and placement section. This includes the services and how many minutes a day a student will be in a regular education class, community, or a special education class. The last thing on this page is the placement and services determination checklist. The next section of the IEP is referred to as placement. This is where the site determination is made, the frequency of progress note reports that the parents will receive, and the checklist for assessment implications. This is also where age of majority will be discussed, if applicable, and finally, parental consent to provide services. And then lastly, if the child will turn 16 during the school year or is already 16 years old, they also must have what's called the transition services page. The transition services page will be the first section filled out for students who are transition age. This page includes post-secondary goals in additional education and independent living. Transition assessments are also included on this page. And then finally, the school, student, family, and agency action steps are broken down and listed. So that's a general overview of all of the IEP pages. We're now going to go back to the beginning and go deeper into each section on those IEP forms. So we're back on the first page of the general student information section of the IEP. Before we get too deep here, I want to note that on this page and every page of the IEP, there will be some general information that's repeated. This includes the student's name, their date of birth, grade, school district, IEP meeting date, state ID, and local ID. This is very similar to like a header on a multi-page document where the same information is repeated. Next, we'll move on to the general student information section. The first information on the IEP form under general student information is the home-based school. This is the school which the student is currently enrolled as identified in that SER system. Other school, this is any other school the student currently attends. IEP type is the type of IEP being held. Is it initial IEP, review IEP, interim IEP? The final thing is the date of the last evaluation, reevaluation, or waiver of reevaluation. A reevaluation must be done every 3 years, or a parent in a school must sign a waiver agreeing that a reevaluation isn't required. I want to note that there are some things to note about waivers. If you agree to a waiver, it will be for 3 years. Waivers cannot be requested if the evaluation is expired, meaning it's over 3 years old, and waivers cannot be conducted more than 6 months prior to the student's evaluation anniversary date. We're now back on the first page of the student information section of the IEP. Next on this page will be the special education exceptionality for your child. Primary is the exceptionality. It's determined by that multidisciplinary evaluation that was conducted by the pupil appraisal team. Other would identify any other exceptionality that's identified by that multidisciplinary evaluation. And detail codes, these are the exceptionality details that are identified. Most students with an IEP just have a primary exceptionality. It's also important to remember that exceptionalities are different than medical diagnosis. Parents often ask why their child with a medical diagnosis of autism doesn't have an educational exceptionality of autism. Well, it's because the student must meet that Louisiana Bulletin 1508 evaluation requirements under the autism exceptionality. If they don't meet that exceptionality, they frequently still meet other exceptionalities. I want to also mention that while the exceptionality is important, it should not be the sole indicator used to determine the services or the placement of your child. The IEP is about meeting your child's unique needs, regardless of their exceptionality. So what is your child's exceptionality? Well, this is determined by the pupil appraisal team, the evaluation team in your school district. This is the team that evaluated your child. We're going to look at the exceptionalities that Louisiana uses to identify children in need of special education services. Students that are found eligible for special education services will have met Bulletin 1508's requirements under one of these 13 exceptionalities. Each one has unique ways to qualify, and some students will qualify under more than one. The classifications include autism, deaf-blindness, developmental delay, emotional disturbance, deaf in or hard of hearing, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impaired, specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment, including blindness. Now remember, a medical diagnosis is not the same thing as a special education exceptionality. This doesn't mean that the medical diagnosis can't be included in the IEP, but it won't be listed as an exceptionality. At least one of these exceptionalities must be included in the general student information. To learn more information about the requirements under each of these exceptionalities, I will have a link to Bulletin 1508 at the end of the presentation that has information on all of the criteria. We're now going to look at the next part of the general student information, which is IEP participants. Having the right people around the table is very important when your IEP team meets. The IEP team members who attend the meeting should sign and state their position. So are they a parent, principal, supervisor, educational diagnostician, regular education teacher, special education teacher? Are they another agency personnel? Their signature here does not imply agreement with the IEP. It's more like a roll call check to make sure the right people are at the table. And we're going to talk about who those people are that must be in attendance. The term Individualized Education Program Team, or IEP team, means a group of individuals composed of the parents of a child with a disability, not less than one general education teacher of such child if the child is or may be participating in the general education curriculum, no less than one special education teacher, or where appropriate, not less than one special education provider of such child. Another IEP team member is a representative of the school district, and this person needs to be qualified to provide or supervise the provision of specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of children with disabilities. They should be knowledgeable about the general education curriculum, and they also need to be knowledgeable about the availability of resources of the school district, because this is the person who's going to be signing off on the IEP committing school district resources. Also part of that IEP team is an individual who can interpret the instructional implications of the evaluation results. This may be a member of the evaluation team. They may work in another capacity on the team as well, but it's someone who can interpret those evaluation results and put that into the instructional plan. Also, team members are other individuals who have knowledge or special expertise regarding the child. This could include related service personnel as appropriate. Again, related service personnel could be speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists. And then whenever appropriate, the child. We believe it's always a positive thing to operate on the premise that the student with a disability may have something vital to contribute to planning his or her educational program in future. Students must be invited to attend IEP meetings if the purpose of the meeting will be the consideration of post-secondary goals for the child and the transition services needed to assist the child in reaching those goals. However, until a child reaches the age of majority under Louisiana law, which is 18 years of age, unless the rights of the parent to act for the child are extinguished or otherwise limited, only the parent has the authority to make educational decisions for the child. And this includes whether the child should or should not attend the IEP meeting. In reality, parents and children will often make this decision together. It's not uncommon for parents and even teachers to encourage children to take part in developing their own IEPs. Some children in elementary school come to the meeting just to learn a little bit about the process or maybe just to share information about themselves. As children get older, it may be a good idea to encourage them to take a more active role. This allows them to have a strong voice in their own education and teach them a great deal about self-advocacy and self-determination. Older children may even lead the IEP team, and specific material exists to help them get ready for such a role. Certain IEP team members may be excused from the IEP meeting under specific conditions. Now, these conditions are going to vary depending on whether or not the team member's area of expertise is going to be discussed or modified in the meeting. When the member's area of expertise is not going to be discussed or modified, the chief condition for excusing a member of the IEP team whose area of expertise is not going to be discussed or modified at the meeting is this. The IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act provision, only applies to certain members of the team, the very ones who are required team members. This includes the child's regular education teacher, special education teacher, a representative of the public agency, and an individual who can interpret the instructional implications of evaluation results. The parent and the school system must both agree in writing that the member's attendance is not necessary. I cannot honestly come up with a single reason a parent will want to agree to have any of these people excused from the meeting. A written agreement between the parent and the school is not required to excuse an IEP team member who has knowledge or special expertise regarding the child, such as like a related service provider. This is because that individual attends the meeting at the discretion of the parents or the public agency, and they're not considered a required team member. So next, it's important to address a student's communication needs. Students with disabilities, like all students, must have the opportunity to fully participate in all aspects of education. This includes academics, social, vocational. Being able to effectively communicate with others is critical in this process. Individualized education program teams are required to consider the communication needs of all students with disabilities and address any identified needs through the student's IEP. Now, I want to note this isn't just for students with limited or no verbal skills. Receptive and or expressive language, apraxia, articulation, fluency, auditory processing, and other communication disorders are also included. Louisiana Act 250 of 2015 states, public schools shall include a communication plan in the individualized education program of every student with an exceptionality who is deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind, If a student has communication needs, this also needs to be addressed under the special factors for communication. There is a link, it's called the Tools for Developing a Communication Plan, and I'll be providing you with that link in your resource section. But here, the team would discuss, does the student have limited or no verbal skills? And either yes or non-applicable will be checked. Then, does the student have other significant impairment in the areas of receptive and or expressive language, including but not limited to impairments in the area of apraxia, articulation, fluency, pragmatics, or auditory processing? And then yes or NA would be chosen. And then in order to effectively plan for the student's unique communication supports needs and facilitate his or her academic progress, in the general student information dropdown, the communication items will be self-populated. And again, there is a tool that the team can use. It's called the Tools for Developing Communication Plans. It's a resource for IEP teams in developing that. So we're back on the general student information page, and we're moving all the way down to the bottom, which is general student information. And that is exactly what it sounds like. This is general information about the student. It should include a general description of the student, student strengths, include places where the student excels, things a student can do independently. Parental concerns is where parents can list all their concerns that they have for their child. So when you're thinking about all of your concerns, is the student working on grade level? Is the student making good grades? Is the student working on the same things other students their age are working on? Can the student do the same things other kids can do? In addition to academics, you also want to think about self-help skills or other skills that will make a student independent. You're not limited to this very tiny space. You can type as much as you need. One of the resources that we'll have for you at the end of the presentation I'm going to send today is what you want to include in the parent concerns part of the IEP. And at the very bottom, you have evaluation and reevaluation results. This should include students' areas of concerns that were outlined in their last evaluation or reevaluation, along with some strengths as well. Now let's continue with the rest of the general student information on the next slide. So this is a continuation of the general student information section, which is located on the page before. The first part you see is academic, developmental, and functional needs. Here, you will list how the student's disability affects the student's involvement and progress in that general curriculum. For a review IEP, the IEP team will revise the IEP to address any lack of progress towards the annual goals. Next is statewide assessment results. So the results of the student's performance on the general, state, or local assessment will be included here. This also includes alternate assessments. Current assessment scores in English language arts, math, science, and social studies should be included. And then the last section is progress or lack of expected progress in the general education curriculum. Here, you would address the areas of general education curriculum where the student is having difficulty. So when writing this section, think about what are the most important areas of the general curriculum for the student to master. And we're now going to talk about the special factors in the general student information. The IEP team must consider the following special factors and include, if needed, a statement addressing these issues on the IEP. So the first one is behavior. In the case of a student whose behavior impedes his or her learning or that of others, consider the use of positive behavior intervention strategies and other strategies to address that behavior. IEP members need to talk about what the child needs and include this information in the IEP. As indicated in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, this will include consideration of the use of positive behavior interventions and supports and other strategies to address the child's behavior. Congress addressed how behavior problems can affect a child's learning or the learning of others in the 1997 reauthorization of IDEA. It explicitly involved the IEP team in considering whether positive behavior supports or other strategies were necessary when a child's behavior was interfering with learning, either the child's own learning or the learning of others in the class. Functional behavior assessments became an important and required element in determining why a child was behaving in disruptive or challenging ways. And behavior intervention plans detailed how the problem would be addressed. A functional behavior assessment is a process to identify the function of a student's behavior. The information collected during the functional behavior assessment process should be used to create effective behavior supports and plans for the student. Within this functional behavior assessment, behavior is seen as serving a purpose, as some type of communication, as performing some function for the child. Functional behavior assessment's goal is to identify what the purpose, function, or communication is for that child. Understanding why a child misbehaves is crucial to developing appropriate behavior supports. Positive behavior intervention strategies plays a role in the broad picture of addressing a child's behavior. It is intended to be used before those problem behaviors become interfering behaviors and is based upon understanding why a child has problem behaviors and what strategies might be helpful. And it also seeks to stop or reduce that problem behavior so that punishment is not necessary. Much research has been conducted on its effectiveness. The next special factor to consider is English learner. This special factor relates to children with limited English proficiency. When we're talking about limited English proficiency, this means an individual who is aged 3 through 21, who is enrolled or preparing to enroll in an elementary or secondary school, who was not born in the United States or whose native language is a language other than English. It includes an individual who is a Native American or Alaska Native or a native resident of the outlying areas, and who came from an environment where a language other than English has had a significant impact on the individual's level of English language proficiency, or who has difficulties in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding English language. So here, the team would discuss those special factors for any individual who has limited English proficiency. The next special factor to consider is communication needs of the child. If the IEP team determines that the child has communication needs, then the team will need to address these in the IEP, including as appropriate through the statement of annual goals, provision of special education and related services, supplementary aids and services, which could include things like assistive technology or other relevant instruction services and supports. Understanding how a child does or does not communicate is paramount to designing appropriate instruction and services. And while any significant impairment in a child's ability to understand and use language plays an enormous role in the child's ability to learn and make progress in that general education curriculum, it does not, in and of itself, mean that a child cannot learn and cannot make progress. Indeed, meeting and supporting a child's communication needs can be pivotal to the child's full participation and progress in that general education curriculum and those non-academic activities. Some alternative ways to communicate could include things like eye gaze, eye pointing, facial expressions, body language, gestures, head nods, word approximations, object or picture symbols, communication symbols, sign language, facilitated communication via some type of assistive technology. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act also lists interpreting services as a related service if the IEP team determines that the child needs the service in order to benefit from special education. The next special factor to consider would be instruction in and use of Braille. So for children who are blind or visually impaired, the IEP team must provide instruction in Braille and the use of Braille unless the team determines after an evaluation of the child's reading and writing skills needs that the instruction in Braille or the use of Braille is not appropriate for the child. However, such an evaluation must include the child's future need for Braille instruction. The IEP team must also consider other appropriate supports and instruction to address a child's needs related to blindness or visual impairment. Having accessible instruction materials is essential. Some examples include enlarged print materials, audio tape materials, math manipulatives, or national instruction materials, accessibility standard formatted materials. Obviously, considering this special factor involves doing so with great deliberation and after gathering the necessary data and evaluation information. Blindness and visual impairment can impact almost all areas related to a child's academic and non-academic participation in school, and it must be thoroughly understood by a child's IEP team. And the final special factors are assistive technology services and devices. AT must be considered for all children with disabilities, regardless of disability. And as is true for other special factors, considerations must be individualized. Assistive technology services include evaluating the child to see if he or she could benefit from using an assistive device. These services also include providing the device and training the child or family or the professionals who work with the child to use that device. Assistive technology device means any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether it was required commercially off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. Now, this term does not include a medical device that is surgically implanted or a replacement of such device. So again, when considering the special factor of assistive technology, this means any service that directly assists a child with a disability in the selection, acquisition, or use of an assistive technology device. The term includes the evaluation of the needs of a child with a disability, including a functional evaluation of the child in the child's customary environment. It includes purchasing, leasing, or otherwise providing for the acquisition of assistive technology devices by children with disabilities. It includes selecting, designing, fitting, customizing, adapting, applying, maintaining, repairing, or replacing assistive technology devices. It includes coordinating and using other therapies, interventions, or services with assistive technology devices. It includes training or technical assistance for a child with a disability, or if appropriate, the child's family, and training or technical assistance for professionals, employers, or other individuals who provide services to or otherwise substantially involved in the major life functions of that child. So that all needs to be considered for each individual student. And then the last special factor is health needs. When a student has health needs that must be managed during the school day, an individualized health plan, an IHP, needs to be attached to the IEP. These needs would include such medical conditions like asthma, diabetes, seizures, or other diseases or disorders that may require lifting and positioning, diapering, assistance with meals, special diets, or other health needs. If the student does not need any special considerations, the checkbox under them can be checked. The one that says after considerations by the IEP team, there are no special factors that need to be addressed at this time. And now we're all the way at the bottom of the general student information. You'll now have to check off the transition course of study. These options will be discussed more in depth when we do our future training on transition, that is navigating the IEP Part 4. But for the purpose of this training, I want to give you a brief description of each. It will be one of the following will be checked off. So your first one is individual prescription for instruction. This is for overage students to receive targeted instruction and accelerated remediation aimed at helping them attain a high school diploma, GED, or state-approved skill certificate. High school and GED students can also work towards industry-based certification. Then you have individual graduation plan. This is required for all students, except students who are assessed on LEAP Connect, the alternate assessment, before leaving 8th grade. This plan must align to the student's transition plan and exit pathway. Then you have individual graduation plan for LEAP Connect students. This is a career diploma pathway for students who are assessed on LEAP Connect, alternate assessment, and it's required for all students eligible for LEAP Connect who are pursuing a career diploma before leaving 8th grade. Again, this plan needs to align with the student's transition plan and their exit pathway. And then you have educational career plan for LEAP Connect students. This is required for students with significant cognitive disabilities who are participating in LEAP Connect, the alternate assessment, pursuing a certificate of achievement. The individual graduation plan for LEAP Connect may be used in place of this form. This plan, again, must also align with the student's transition plan and exit pathway. The final part, the general student information, is identifying the educational needs of the student. Using the information that is written all throughout that general student information section, the team will determine the educational need areas in which special education services are needed. If this is an interim IEP team meeting, the team would project the areas of special education needs. For all students, not less than one goal must be written. The following 6 areas may be included. The first educational need area is academic cognitive. So if the student has needs in the academic areas, such as reading, written language, and mathematics, and or in the cognitive needs, such as acquisition, manipulation, organization, storage, retrieval, and expression. The next educational need area may be behavior. If the student has needs in behavior or when they have a behavior that impedes learning or the learnings of others. The next educational need area is communication. If the student has difficulty in understanding and communicating with others, such as writing and language development, articulation, augmentative and adaptive methods, etc. The next educational need area is motor. Needs may include fine and gross motor movement, such as handwriting and walking. Self-help. Needs may include things like toileting, dressing, safety, health needs, such as self-catheterization or insulin maintenance. And then social. Needs may include things like peer interaction and strengthening self-concept. Once those areas of needs are identified, then the team would then move on to the instructional plan. And that's where we are going to pick up in navigating the IEP Part 2. So in navigating the IEP Part 2, we will be discussing the instructional plan and annual goals. Here is a list of some of the numerous resources that I mentioned in today's training. The links are there on the screen. The first one is LDOE Bulletins. That's the Louisiana Department of Education's bulletins. The bulletins that I was discussing throughout the presentation, Bulletin 1508, that Pupil Appraisal Handbook, and Bulletin 1530, the IEP Handbook. You can find those bulletins there. Bulletin 1508 is where you would find the criteria for those 13 exceptionalities. We also have tools for developing communication plans. That is a link to that tool to help teams, IEP teams, develop those communication plans for students. If you would like copies of the blank IEP forms, the link to that one is there as well. That is on the Louisiana Department of Education's website. And then at request, we also have parent concerns handout. If you are not really sure what to include in your parent concern section of your IEP, I have a handout that I could send to you that gives you information on what to include in that section. I want to thank everyone for viewing Navigating the IEP Part 1. Please check out all of our other webinars and trainings.